Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Be Not Afraid podcast. I'm Caleb Marcel. And the reason that I chose Caleb is because it's about standing in the hard and difficult places and doing the hard and difficult things. Those are the kind of guests that I like to have. Today is no different. My guest is Nicki Truesdell. Nicki has recently been caught up in the whole anti-homeschool wave for simply having an opinion. And I wanted to talk to you today, especially as we're starting to move back. We only have a couple of weeks before we go back to school. I want to start talking to people who've chosen alternatives to public school, and to see why and to see how they've made successes, what failures they've had. So today we will be speaking with Nicki. Welcome, Nicki.
Thank you for having me.
So just tell me about yourself. I don't know a whole lot about you. I just saw your post on, yeah.
Yeah, I'm actually a second generation homeschooler. I was homeschooled in the 80s, back when it was very new. My mom and dad took my sister and me out of school, and we started in 1983. And so from about sixth grade on, I was homeschooled, and I loved it enough to go ahead and decide to do that for my kids. And so I've been homeschooling my kids for 26 years. I have five. Four are grown, and I've got one left now who is hopefully trying to finish up her senior year this year. So I've been homeschooling for a long time. Through my own homeschooling years, I developed a love of history. You know, everybody has their thing that they gravitate towards, and that was mine. And so even as a homeschool kid, I delved into my curriculum voluntarily in my free time. I read a lot of books, and I'm really thankful that my parents actually, had access to quality materials outside of the public system, basically. And so I read historical books that were based on primary sources, and that's what really led me to what I do today. And so what I do today is I still encourage people to homeschool. I'm always encouraging people to get their kids out of public school. That's my number one thing. My number two thing is to republish old American history resources, primary documents, autobiographies, letters, journals, all those things. I just reprint them exactly as they were and put them out in paperback form so that more people will read them again. Because as you have clearly seen, there's an entire generation that has no clue what was actually accomplished or written in our history. So that's a little bit about me.
Why did your parents pull you out?
Conviction. They felt like, based on their own experiences in public school, they said, "Oh, there's a way out. We're going to take it." That's the short version. But they had lived pretty wild lifestyles, and then in 1981 they became Christians, and so they radically changed everything about their lives, including parenting, and homeschooling was part of that. And so it was definitely a conviction from God.
So is everything that you do from a Christian perspective, or when you're promoting these sources, a lot of people will say, the founding fathers weren't even Christian.
Yeah.
And I just recently saw one of your posts about that. And I've been to like Glenn Beck's The Vault, and I've seen a lot of things that would put that to rest.
Mm-hmm.
Now, from my understanding, and I also teach history, but I always teach my goal is to teach my students intellectual humility, to say we don't know everything.
Amen.
And we need to be okay with learning more, but we also need to test that more, because revisionist history is a thing.
And it's not more, it's just a new narrative.
Yeah, I agree. Explain that, actually. Go into that for me.
Well, I love the way you phrased it. We should be open to learning more, and we should. I absolutely agree. And in the modern age, there's always new, real information that does come out. That's different from someone who takes an existing document even, but the existing story that we know and can verify, and retelling it, leaving things out or adding commentary or opinion into it. That's kind of what I mean by that, which is happening all over the place right now.
Right. I play Harriet Tubman and Elizabeth Freeman across the state.
Oh, wow.
And in finding information about them, I've had young children walk up to me, like elementary school age, and say, I thought she just had a sleeping disease. I didn't know there was anything to do with faith. I didn't know she believed in God. That's such a part of Harriet's story.
Yes.
And even though it's a part of Harriet's story, I don't have a problem with teaching the hard truth. I
Mhm.
don't know that you would call Harriet a Christian. She
Mhm.
followed God, but she didn't really like the New Testament. And
Mhm.
I think that that's something that people need to know.
Yes.
Keep going.
Yeah, I agree. I this is this is how I feel about education in general, and as a Christian homeschool mom, I'm a big advocate of Christian education, and when it comes to history instruction, I want my kids to know all throughout history what someone believed or didn't believe and why. It really matters. It matters to whatever it was that they accomplished or did to change the world. So if they were a Christian, I want my kids to know that. If they were not a Christian, I want my kids to know that. If, like you said, it was like a cultural Christianity thing, but they really didn't believe the gospel of Jesus Christ, I think my kids need to know that. Whatever their beliefs are, all of it is what we should be talking about. And I think people that accuse us of whitewashing history or, you know, God washing history or whatever, they're saying we're leaving things out. No, we are the ones who are trying to teach every single bit of it. We are the ones saying they believed this, they did not believe this. And there's so many things you can go into with the founding fathers over the whole were they Christians or not thing. They were all different. The majority of them were Christians. And then those that were Christians had varying beliefs in their Christianity, just like Christians today do. That's why we have so many denominations in the United States, because while most of the people in these denominations can agree on most of the Bible, there are going to be little things that we disagree on, and that's why we split off into groups. The founding fathers were the exact same way. You can't say, "Oh, they were Christians because they didn't believe in this one thing that I believe in." It was same, I would say, more Christian society than it is today, but it was the same level of, oh, I believe this tenet, I disagree with that, or I don't practice this. That's all it was. And what public education is doing now is removing all of that and calling itself neutral. And what they're doing is denying kids a full history education, because they're not anything that says God or church or Jesus Christ or faith. They just delete it in an effort to say, well, we're religiously neutral, but that's a religion in itself. That's just atheism or secularism. And so that's not a complete education either. And as I said, we get accused of not giving a full education, but I think we're the only ones, when I say we, the people that are looking at all sides of a person's beliefs, we're the only ones giving the full story. And that's what I'm so passionate about.
Right, a well-rounded education.
Yes.
And I think it's interesting and ironic that people say, well, we don't want religion shoved down our kids' throats because, yes, secularism is actually religion. Very strongly. I'm reading The Devil in Karl Marx right now,
Oh,
and their belief in their thing is dogmatic.
that's a painful book.
Extremely. It is. It's extremely. It's a rough one.
Yes, I've read that one. I taught a class on communism to a local homeschool group here, and I taught from that book, but with teenagers, I didn't even want to recommend it because it's
Right.
so dark.
I know.
But it gives the true picture of communism.
Yeah, I
Oh,
actually we're discussing chapter 5 in our book club, and I'm just like, well, let's discuss chapter 4 and chapter 6. And you guys can read 5, but honestly, you might want to pray and like guard your hearts because this
yes.
stuff is so heavy. And I'm afraid to even say the kind of things that happened
Yeah,
because,
it's so awful.
well,
I
and we have
taught
people
6
who
weeks of
believe it today.
communism, and I just needed, like, several days of Hallmark movies to undo all the damage, you know? It's
Yes.
so dark, it's so
Yeah.
ugly and awful, so
Yeah.
that's the truth. That is teaching the whole story.
Well, and what's been interesting about that is I know several people here who have went to the Capitol who have escaped socialism, the true refugees,
Yeah,
and have said, our children, our kids, as in our Venezuelan kids, our, other Latin kids, our African kids, we want them to know about socialism. We
good.
want them to know its dangers.
Yeah,
And our our people sit and say, no, now's not the right time.
you
And
don't
different
have
people have different views of socialism. And it's
Yeah,
like, well, you can have whatever view, but the view I see is people starving in food lines
Mhm.
and resentment. And to me, that's the biggest argument for homeschool is not just the well-rounded education, which I think is extremely important, but also the joy. Because
Yes.
I think we're taking that from so many of our young
Oh, yeah.
people and the mental health crises that they constantly talk about. You don't see it so much. At least I don't see it
Yeah.
so
Well,
much in the homeschool world. Do
you
you?
can have a mental health problem when all you're told is that your whole race is bad, that your country is bad, everything that happened here is awful, and there's no joy, there's no hope, there's nothing beautiful about liberty. It's enough to drive you crazy.
Well,
And
it's nihilism.
yes, it's of course people have a mental health problem after going through K-12 and university where this is what is taught. It's the undercurrent in every single subject.
So you teach in co-ops, you teach
Mhm.
okay. So do you see a lot of mental health issues?
No, no.
Keep on. Like, I mean,
I
because
mean,
everybody says we're in a mental health crisis. All of our youth are feeling this way, and I don't see it either. I may have one or two kids. I definitely have kids who have bad days and good days.
yeah,
Not the same.
that's different. Yeah, a mental health issue is not the same as being sad or tired or whatever. Normal emotions are not a
Right.
mental health crisis, and I think those are also being confused for mental health issues. But yeah, I've been in the same homeschool Christian co-op for all these years, 26 years. And I think the point is that it is a Christian group, and these are parents who deeply care about their children, and they're with them all day. So they see them and interact with them, and they understand what's going on in their lives. And then the parents are also there to help, whether that's to personally help counsel them through something, to reach out to a pastor or a counselor for help, which is also um, just not as needed. Parents generally can talk through things with their children and help them to understand their emotions and their feelings. But I'm a big believer also in the fact that when we reject God, we invite all of these other issues into our lives. We invite mental health problems. And that is not to say I'm not making a blanket statement against mental health issues, but what I'm saying is some of the things that are labeled that can fall under the umbrella of, well, I've rejected God and everything about the biblical worldview. And it does change your life. It changes the way you think and it changes the way you process things. It's definitely unhealthy. And so, and I'm not going to back down from that.
Well, and there's a difference between rejecting God and saying, I just don't want anything in my life. I'm just going to
Mhm.
be, I'm going to be a tree hugger.
Yeah.
And people who hate God
Oh, absolutely.
or people who want to be gods. Like that because then there's no humility. There's I
Yeah.
am right. You will do what I say always. And it becomes extremely totalitarian. And that's what I've
Yeah.
seen in terms of these people who can't just be fine with having schools that educate their kids the way they want them educated. They want
Mhm.
your kids educated that way.
Mhm.
So whether that's, racial stuff, and the racial stuff, quite frankly, is insulting. I want to get into because a couple of years ago, I went with a parents advocacy group to DC, and
Okay.
then I was like, oh, we have to come back. So I brought my family back. And we just happened to come in June, which was dumb. And
Oh, yeah.
so
Yeah, I'm sure.
so so we walked into the Museum of Transportation, and they had transformed it to the Museum of Transportation. And as we're walking around, there were a bunch of young people. There was some sort of awards that young people were getting for their essays on their historical essays. And the winner was giving her presentation just in a little trifold box on a table, but she was giving her presentation on why Donald Trump is a fascist and all of his links
What
to
does that have
Hitler.
to do with transportation?
There's all that, right? So, and I don't want to get into the political of it, but what I do want to get into is that this young person, I honestly, she could not have been older than 14. And my father-in-law, who was a public school teacher, just tried to engage her. And she immediately went into victim, you can't ask me a question. Now, that is not what I see in the homeschool co-ops.
Oh, no, it's quite the opposite. They love to answer questions. They
Yeah.
ask them and they answer them. And oh my goodness, yeah.
And often in depth.
Yes.
So oftentimes they know their stuff. Now, I have recognized that a lot of our young people, I mean, thank you phones, are leaning into their emotions and kind of checking out of logic. And I feel like that's something that you, from what I've seen, just glancing, that's
Yes.
something that you really focus on, is teaching logic. How do you go about, 26 years? I have 4 years involved in homeschool,
Okay.
but so 26 years, how do you go about teaching logic, teaching reason to kids?
Well, recently I started using a curriculum put out by Dr. Jason Lyle, who is an astrophysicist creationist. But one of his, I mean, he teaches astronomy, creation, the biblical account in Genesis and things like that. And he's very smart, and he's also very he's very easy to understand. So my kids have always enjoyed watching his videos, and we've gone to see him live a few times. But one of the things that he also is really big on is logic. And one time I heard him say, someone asked in the crowd, what can we do to prepare our kids who have been homeschooled, they're raised in Christian homes, but they're going out into the world and they're going to college. What is the best preparation? And he said two things: teach them to know the Bible, teach them a course in logic. And he didn't even have a course in logic at that time, but I think he realized, okay, we need that. So he created a course just for high schoolers. And so the last 3 kids of mine have actually been taking that course. Before that, we just used conversation. And, any thinking parent can do this without any training in logic. You don't have to know the terms for the logical fallacies to be able to spot errors in thinking. And so you have to be able to just have these conversations. And so a lot of times what I would do in the early days with my kids is show them a social media post that was ridiculous. And I would read it to them and then let them see the comments, or maybe comments responding to something that I had written. Let them see these arguments and then say, let's talk about this. What do you think? What would you say? What's your response? What did this person get wrong? What could they have done differently? And so whether you've ever had a course in logic or not, I think we underestimate our ability to think logically. And so just have conversations with your kids. Just use your common sense. But I highly recommend a course in logic also for your high schoolers, but you don't have to wait till high school. You can start these conversations young. My kids were able to have these conversations way before high school, just in the car. If we were going somewhere and saw a magazine headline, or at home, like I said, with social media posts, it's really not rocket science at all. And unfortunately, it is so easy. More people need to be doing this with their kids.
Well, part of the problem is that people believe in an expert class, which
Oh my
means
gosh,
that they're
yes.
building a large this bureaucracy government, right?
Yep.
Because they are like, somebody else has to do it for me. I am
Yeah.
incapable.
And unfortunately, homeschoolers fall into that fear.
Right. Right.
Mhm.
Well, and so I teach at a co-op that parents don't have to be a part of. I think it's barely starting, and so people are starting, but normally what they do is they take former teachers or people who worked in academia,
Mhm.
or somebody like me who is just, I absolutely love history and I write a lot
Yes.
and I love talking to people, so it
Yeah.
works. But so I teach a little differently. Would you say that you've intentionally sheltered your kids?
In certain ways, yes. And then in other ways, no. So I would say, because my kids have been raised in this constantly changing internet, that's kind of where we found the need for shelter. But when it comes to worldviews, we don't. We introduce the varying worldviews and beliefs at an age appropriate time and discuss them. And that can start as young as elementary school when they ask you a question, but also in your curriculum when you're talking about different people around the world and things that happen in history. You can talk in depth about. You don't have to stay on the curriculum. You don't have to only read the textbook and then stop there. You can pause and say, so here's what I think. I've said
Right.
for a long time, one of the greatest things about homeschooling is the time that you have to go off on rabbit trails and have in-depth conversations with your kids. Even if you don't know the answers, you can say, that's a really good question. I'd like to know that too. Let's go find out together. That is the beauty. Instead of just reading from a script and like you said, letting an expert do everything for you. It's not that hard. And so as far as sheltering, we try to shelter them from the ridiculous and the dangerous while still discussing worldviews and helping them to learn how to look at them. And of course, educating them in the biblical worldview all along.
And they know that from the beginning. They know that they're learning from a biblical worldview.
Oh, I say it all the time.
Yeah,
I
right.
use the term biblical worldview in my homeschool all the time. Yeah.
I think that that's so important. When I'm teaching in a classroom, I make a very clear distinction between facts. These are things we know. Let's go look at the evidence. And I pull it up on the big board.
Mm-hmm.
And these are theories. Some people believe this and other people believe this.
Right.
Where do you think you might fall? And then I like play, because I'm working with kids, right? So I'll be like, stand up if you think this is a great idea. Sit down. And sometimes they'll stand up and sit down. And the whole goal is to make sure every single one of them. And I think that this is the twist that that's being kind of lied about, I guess, is that they'll say, well, we want our schools to be safe and welcoming places. Safe and welcoming, let me be super clear, means for LGBTQ.
Amen. Thank you for saying that.
That's what it means.
Time. Yeah. The same thing with kindness campaigns.
Yes.
I blogged about this many, many years ago. The kindness campaigns were absolutely 100% about LGBTQ kids. Be
from the beginning.
Accept them and don't question anything. That's all.
And I, especially the T, I want to hit that really hard.
Yes.
Especially the T. And also, and I think we should get into this race conversation, race and homeschool. But they used George Floyd to say we need to infuse racist stuff, racial focused stuff into all of our education. Everything from math and science to history. We need to revise it. The kids need to be able to see themselves. Here's George Washington. Oh, did you know he was Black? It's just not the case.
Yeah.
So I last year was teaching ancient history and I was talking about Cleopatra and I said, now you're going to go home and you're going to look it up on Netflix and you're going to be like, wow, Cleopatra looks a lot like Mrs. B. And I will say, but she didn't. She did not have pigtails in her hair. So how do you make it funny, but also address the truth? Our poor kids are being lied to. They're being miseducated.
Well, one thing I've done with my kids is show them the lies. So I have a copy of Howard Zinn's book, the history of
the
whatever.
Yeah.
But then I also have Mary Graybar's book, Debunking Howard Zinn. And so what I've done is read both books together out loud. Okay, here's what he said. And then here's her response. And then she also attacks his horrid scholarship and, his lack of citations and omissions of tons of actual facts of history. And so when we started reading about Columbus and then moved into other parts of American history, I opened the Zinn book and I opened the Debunking Zinn book. And because I want them to know what everybody around them has been hearing has been taught. And then I want them to know, actually, though, there's more to the story. And like I said, these kids that are being trained on Zinn history, which whether you've ever heard of Zinn or not, you're being trained in Zinn's history. They are not getting the full story. We want to give our kids the full story. And that includes when the people that have helped found this nation did things that we don't approve of. That's the full story.
Right.
The good, bad, and the ugly. And so that's how I approach it with especially teenagers, obviously not the younger kids. I do it kind of as I feel like they're ready for it. And each kid is going to be a little bit different. But I'd say middle school and up, You can definitely do that. I have my kids read the Communist Manifesto. I want them to know what Hitler said in his own words. That's the most full education. And
And
then,
that's the kind of thing that you'd get attacked for. Like I've
yeah.
seen people say
Oh, I know.
they've read Mein
There's
Kampf,
Yeah.
and it's like,
I
well,
have
of
a copy
course.
of it in my bookshelf because it's a primary source and it influenced history.
Yeah.
And so, yes, we got to know what everybody said. George Washington and Karl Marx. We need to know what they all said and then judge for ourselves. But man, when you read stuff in context, it's a pretty good education.
So how about, have you ever had a situation where you thought you knew something and then you found out, oh, I got this so wrong? Have
Oh yeah. I'm 54, so there's been a lot of years of figuring things out. And one of those things was the Crusades. When I was a young adult, I still thought they were bad. And then I started reading and learning and realized, oh, they didn't last long enough and we need them today. So yeah. And because like I said, I was homeschooled in the 80s. Um, there was still a lot of things that were not being addressed, even in homeschool curriculum then. And I didn't, you know, I'd say even today, I have said this about the Crusades. Even homeschool curriculum barely touches on, yes, this was necessary. And I think it's still a touchy subject for a lot of people today. But so I just grew up thinking kind of what everybody else said. Oh man, the Catholic Church was just killing people left and right. And
Mhm.
there's so many nuances to that statement right there. Whether you're Catholic or Protestant or nothing.
Well, and what you never hear about is the Muslims and what they were doing in
Right.
terms of,
Yeah.
why there needed to be something fighting
When
back.
you read that, then you go, oh, so yeah, the Crusades is one of them. There's so many others. Gosh, there's so many things because I grew up in a time of Zen history, even though I was not in public school after junior high. It's still everywhere. The narrative has been everywhere in the culture for so long that we're all having to go, wait, what? Wait, is that really true? Even the homeschoolers are having to do that because of all of our institutions have been captured.
Yes.
So, yeah, even as a homeschooler, even as a history buff and a history lover, there's only so much time in a day to read all the books. And so the more I read, the more I learn, and the more I say, okay, yeah, that I see this differently now.
I'm reading about Alfred the Great right now.
Oh, which book?
And it's just a
A bunch of stuff.
medieval, yeah, it's just a history of many, or it's
I
just,
love Alfred
yeah,
the Great.
yeah, but just learning about him and learning um about how he realized that these people who were completely demoralized because the Vikings had come and just destroyed.
Mhm.
And he was like, we need a culture.
Mhm.
And because
The
last year I
evil
asked my
Anglo-Saxon culture.
right, and I asked my students last year about culture, and even though, these are homeschooled kids, they were kind of like, "Oh, we're not supposed to." And I'm like, "Oh my goodness, we are making shields, we are making your coat of
Yeah.
arms, we are going all on culture and values and valor." And because it's important. It's important that we aren't
Yes.
just
Cultures are
so,
good.
well, yeah, and there's good in every culture. And one of the words that I love teaching my students was the word nuance.
Yes. Yeah.
We're going to Louisiana in a few weeks. We're going to New Orleans, and watching the history of New Orleans again, nuanced.
Mhm.
Some things that Jackson did, not so good. Some
Mhm.
things that he did were
Mhm.
amazing, and that's true about all of us, right? So,
Yeah.
but we're not. I mean, I was told by a friend that their teacher, who's part Native American or maybe all Native American, will not be teaching Thanksgiving because her family walked on the Trail of Tears. And I said,
Mhm.
yeah, my response would be, so are you going to also avoid the part about how Native Americans had slaves?
Yeah.
I'm like,
Very good question.
I'm
And
sorry,
and
but
sometimes they had black slaves.
yeah, no, the
Right.
Native Americans did have black slaves
Yeah.
on the Trail of Tears. And I'm like, are we going to ignore that part because you
Yes. Yes,
just
we
want
are.
your students to know that you were a victim?
Right.
even though you weren't.
Right.
And it's not healthy for kids to always be looking back. This is how the African American community, and not all, let me be so clear about that, but this is how so many in the African American community have failed to progress as other groups have progressed,
Mhm.
because they're taught look back, and look back in anger.
Yeah.
Never look forward to what you could accomplish if you let go of that.
Especially in America. The same country that did have slaves now doesn't have slaves, and opportunity for everyone. Not guarantees, but opportunity is there for everyone. And yeah, it's all in your worldview.
So let's talk about that worldview. The Smithsonian's report on Blackness or on whiteness was such a slap in the face. You saw it,
Yes.
right? So it has things like to be on time, as if the only culture that's ever required timeliness is white people.
Yeah.
Um,
But apparently that's white supremacy.
right. To be good at math.
I know white people that are not on time, by the way.
Right. I mean, every group has insert something time, insert something people time, black people time, country people time.
Yes.
Like it's everywhere,
Oh,
right?
gosh.
So
Yes.
it's but it's so insulting, and it also makes the person feel like everything in my life is because other people did to me,
Mhm.
as opposed to, and it's shocking to me. We now know there's so many stories of African Americans who have achieved, who've been
Mhm.
brilliant. So the whole, oh, traumatized by slavery. I'm sorry, but that first generation after slavery was reading Greek and Latin under
Yes.
Booker T. Washington. And we are not supposed to talk about that anymore because it
No.
goes against a narrative.
Yep.
So tell me what you said that got you in trouble.
Actually, I just posted someone else's tweet
Oh,
that I
okay.
agreed with, on so this was on the Knowledge Keepers Facebook page, which is the business where I reprint old American history books.
Okay.
And the tweet, I don't have it in front of me right now, but he basically said that the Smithsonian is anti-white. And if you look at the report that the White House has put out, no, Donald Trump did not write the report. It's, you
Right.
know, it's a coalition of people. Go ahead, and they went in and documented not only what the Smithsonian has on display and what they don't have on display, but also looked at all of the publications and, you know, the things that the Smithsonian puts out for the public, and also their internal documents that determine how they treat history. So this report is like 162 pages long. I've read it, and it is very clear that yes, the Smithsonian is anti-white. They're anti-America. They're anti-founders, anti-capitalist,
I would say
anti-liberty.
anti-Western civilization.
There you go. That's what they're
You know,
anti.
when they say white, they mean anti-Western
West,
civilization,
yes.
because a person like me, who, if you're only listening, you might not be able to tell, but a person like me who is of color, is not allowed to speak.
Right. You don't
Because
count.
I have the wrong ways of knowing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's insane. Let me just go through their list here, and I'm sorry
Yeah.
I'm going to read it, but so rugged individualism, that's whiteness.
Mhm.
Emphasis on the scientific method. Okay, they want your kids in schools that believe that the Smithsonian is the expert, the end all be all, but yet emphasis on the scientific method is a bad thing
Mhm.
in school.
And as you go through this list, it's important for your listeners to note that the Smithsonian produces educational materials and trains teachers across the country. So this is not just something that you encounter if you go to the Smithsonian. It's happening in K-12 and in universities and at museums across the nation. So go ahead with
Yes.
your list.
No, Protestant work ethic. Hard work
Right.
is the key to success. Work before play. If you don't meet your goals, you didn't work hard enough. Those are all supposed to be ideas of whiteness, but just about every single culture has these. You know what I'm thinking of? I'm thinking of the Karate Kid, when Mr. Miyagi is teaching Ralph, what's his name, to work hard, to be
Yeah.
disciplined. Work hard and discipline has been the keys of success since well
Yeah.
before America was ever invented.
And it is specific to America as well. I did a podcast recently called Making America Great Again, and I listed some of the things that made America great in the first place. And I say, these are what we can do again. And one of them is the Puritan work ethic. And I'm reading a book right now. I don't have it in front of me, but it's from 1828. It's by an English lady who came to America to travel, and she stayed a couple years, and something like called The Domestic Manners of the Americans. Anyway, it's very interesting because she's English. She's coming from like the world of Jane Austen.
Okay,
So
yes.
she comes over here and she's trying to be kind, but she's really not impressed with America. And one of the things, she settled in Cincinnati for about a year with her children. And one of the things that she noted was they don't do a lot of, entertaining and, just like fun stuff. These people are always working. That's all they care about is work, work, work. And I was like, yeah, so you come from England where if you're in the upper classes, all you do is leisure. All you do is
Right.
visit people and have parties and tea and nothing of any substance. And then she's putting the Americans down. This is, not long after the revolution, 1828. It's exploding. Why? Because they were intent on working hard and building a civilization out of a wilderness. And they did. And she's
Yes.
like, they don't entertain themselves at all. They work, they eat, they go to bed, and they do it all again the next day. That's the Puritan work ethic. And it lasted way longer than the Puritans did.
And isn't that such a good point? Because we are told that if you were a certain class in America, you never worked. But we know that the founding fathers, I mean, they were farmers, they were lawyers, they worked. So
Yeah, they may not have had a minimum wage job, but people have such
right.
a hard time looking past what we know today and understanding previous times and cultures, but they worked. They had
Well, there's
multiple.
also the elitism to pretend that there weren't people living, barely making it in Europe
Mhm.
forever.
Exactly.
Like,
Yes,
so while you
every
didn't
class.
see that in your lofty world, there were many people dying. I
Yes.
just finished Crime and Punishment, and the things that they had to do to survive, we should be grateful that we don't have to.
Mhm. Mhm.
So, but it's always America. It's always America is so bad. Now,
Mhm.
why do you think that there is such a push, and it is, to make sure when they say we want all children to have a public school education, they mean it,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
They very much mean all children, and it's not to have a right to. It's that is the demand.
Mhm.
They want to end homeschooling. Why?
Because we are different. We're not following, the standards of the state and federal education guidelines, which are ridiculous. And we are, although homeschooling appeals to all people, it's still very much a majority of conservatives and Christians that do it. It was conservative Christians that started the movement in the 80s, and it's still largely conservative Christians that homeschool. And it's for a purpose. Like I said, my parents were convicted by God that their kids should not be raised by a government school system that was secular, humanist, and sometimes atheist. And so, like you said, they want our children. They need to brainwash everyone. And they often, accuse homeschool parents of indoctrination. But the word indoctrination just means to teach. So,
Hmm.
yep, we're
Hmm.
doing that. We're heavily indoctrinating our children just like the public schools are. And so they don't want our kids to know. I mean, when I say they, it's not a conspiracy theory. It is documented fact that those in charge of education are left-wing liberals who want to tear down this country. Everything that you and I are discussing in this episode right now is part of the agenda. It's well documented. They don't hide it. And so if we're doing the opposite of that, we're a threat to their whole plan. And they do want you to hate God, to hate your family, to, the trend now is to stop speaking to your parents because you don't agree with them. They
Right.
want you to hate your country. All of that is bound up in this whole big plan. And like I said, it's not a conspiracy. I don't like conspiracy theories. I deal in facts, and it is very easy to verify all of this.
Well, if you go back to social and emotional learning, which is a huge push in our schools,
Mhm.
the people, John Fetzer, who started the Fetzer Institute, he he had some very interesting beliefs, and I would say totalitarian beliefs,
Yeah.
and that's what's going in the schools. So not only are the kids not being taught to be well-rounded, because they're not, they're
No.
being taught specifically that certain people are not worth existing
Yeah.
in polite society. I mean,
Mhm.
I live in Utah. I was here when, 10 months ago, and the amount of people who just sort of went blink, blink, nothing happened, don't care,
Yeah.
and that was nicer than what a lot of people were doing.
It's frightening.
But I think that that was more frightening, to know that there were teachers at that university going blink, blink, nothing happened. We're on, carry on with class, as if
Yeah.
a life doesn't matter. And
And worse after that, this
yes,
mocking and laughter.
yes, yes,
Well,
yes.
one
But
of
I
the
don't think
things that
that
I
was
always
worse. I don't think that that was worse, because I think it's always better to be able to stare something in the face
That's
and
true.
know that it's evil, versus someone who just, I didn't say a thing in my classroom. And
Yeah.
it's so cold, and it's so, I just think it's repeating history.
Oh, yeah. One of the things that I think about almost every day when I encounter any kind of this ugliness, like you're talking about, or like what, people did to me a couple days ago online, is how many times the American founders said that this country, this experiment is not going to work without a population full of people with morals. And they weren't just saying be good. They were very specific in many of their writings that,
Yeah.
the morality that we are talking about is from the Bible. It is from the Christian Bible. It's from the New Testament, the gospel of Jesus Christ. Like, they were not vague at all. They there were a couple of deists, but to say the founding fathers were deists is just a big fabrication. But back to the point, they said this country, this republic, will not last without people of morality. And I every day when I see the opposite online, I think this is going to be our downfall. People
Yes.
who will lie. Just like on my post, people started leaving bad reviews on my page because that's the way they wanted to get back at me. And then so they would make up stories and say I was on To Catch a Predator, or they said this owner is a pedophile. This person messaged me for pictures of a 14-year-old. Like, they just make stuff up. And I had to turn off all reviews because it was so hard to keep up with.
Well, and
And then
one of
they
the,
said,
go ahead.
she's asking for fake good reviews. And I was like, no, I'm asking for real reviews
But
because of the fake ones. But they're willing to lie. They're willing
yes,
to harass. They're willing to call names. And worse, they will laugh at someone who's assassinated. This is a complete, huge breakdown in morality in this country, and the morality that is based in the scriptures. It goes all the way back to how God told us this. Here's what works. You should do it this way. And so, yeah, we're seeing this country falling apart, and it's not that hard to see basic morals, basic morals.
when I think of joy, I use the acronym Jesus, others, and yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and when you look at the world, and you're focused on others, how can I help others? How
Mm-hmm.
can I be a light?
Mm-hmm.
Um, you genuinely are able to fight depression. You're
Oh,
able, you're
man.
like, you just, it does make the world a better place. Now,
Oh, yeah.
we are taught instead that everything is about the self, the self, the self, the self. Um, I think that that's like a cancer that is
Mm-hmm.
making so many of our kids sick. Oh, you don't affirm me? Oh, you don't
Yeah.
know. I mean, even in like good, positive families, I recognize with my own child that, if you're saying something and they don't like it, earbuds in, walk away. And we laugh, but it's actually, I think, far more serious than that,
It is.
because they are being taught, well, they're not abandoning us. They're not going to the children's center down the street, right? They're just checking out.
Mm-hmm.
But how long does that, for that habit? I don't listen to people who don't say exactly what I want them to say. How long before that habit becomes something more and you do become estranged? I know several people who are estranged from their children. And
Mm-hmm.
and it is intentional, and it's always been part of the Marxist playbook.
Yeah.
They used to do it by loading them up in trucks and driving them away and sending the parents out there and shooting some of the parents.
Mm-hmm.
They're not doing that now. They're just teaching the kids to be activists, and some of them become shooters.
Kind of like in Mao's China.
Yes.
What we're seeing now is what they did then, and dividing the parents from the children and calling their parents stupid and backwards and
Yes.
ignorant. That's exactly what's happening in America right now.
Eritrea did the same thing. Eritrea told their people that their families, their old traditions, old values, old
Mm-hmm.
beliefs, that they were all something backwards.
Mm-hmm.
Specifically, backwards was when I interviewed a person. Um, and yes, absolutely. But in America, the way that it's different is it looks glossy. Again, I live in Utah, the place where everybody has a fifth grade presentation where they wave their flags and sing American songs, and everybody goes, "Oh, there's nothing to worry about here."
Yeah.
Um, but we are the place where the teachers blinked and said,
Mm-hmm.
"Nothing to worry about. You
Mm-hmm.
saw nothing," you know?
Yeah.
Um, and that has been horrifying. Let's talk about the outcomes of education, because that is one thing a lot of people do. I did this actually, is now I didn't do it because of me. You can thank my husband for this one. But at high school, my son went back to the public school. And I think for 10th grade, I won out. But for 11th and 12th, my husband wanted to see him walk across, and graduate. And there are pluses. There are pluses. You have many more opportunities, right? Um, than most people have that are homeschooling, because contrary to popular belief, most people in homeschooling are not rich.
Right.
And that's one part that people need to remember. But let's talk about the other outcomes. What successes have you seen with homeschoolers?
Oh, across the board, there are things that can be measured on a test. Obviously, the statistics routinely show the homeschoolers test out at 15 to 20% higher than their public school counterparts. I would actually like to see some more recent numbers on that, because I think that the gap is going to get wider.
I agree.
Because the 2025 Nation's Report Card stats on public education say that, and this is across the country, 22% of 12th graders are proficient in math, and 35% of 12th graders are proficient in reading. So those are pretty dismal results. And if the homeschoolers are already testing above the public schoolers, and public school keeps on the path that they're on, it's just the gap is going to get wider. But then there are things you can't measure on a test, like the ability to have a conversation, like we talked about. How many books they're reading. It's all over the news now that public school kids are often graduating without reading one single book. They're entering college without having read a book.
They're getting excerpts.
Colleges are not even enforcing book reading.
Mm-hmm.
And then, like we've been talking about this whole time, worldview it can't be measured on an exam. Worldview, the ability to think critically, the ability to use logic in different situations, those are the things that we can't necessarily measure, but you can see. And just, I think I get a lot of people, a lot of trolls will say, "Oh, all homeschoolers are idiots and they can't carry conversation." And I've been in the homeschool world for more than 40 years. So I know a lot of homeschoolers. I know hundreds of homeschoolers, not only the kids, but the ones who already graduated and are now having kids who are already graduating. Like, that's how long I've been in the homeschool world. And so I now have just started telling people, you probably know homeschoolers and you don't know it, because they're just normal. Mm-hmm. They are able to carry on conversations. When my kids go into the workplace, people will find out they were homeschooled and go, "Whoa, you were homeschooled? I had no idea. You don't seem like a homeschooler." Yeah, because they're just adults, they can have conversations and they're not the stereotype that people think they know. And so the outcomes can be measured, and then there's so many more that can't be measured. But the reality is the ability to think. I think those are some of the top things.
Well, I
Having
think
the biblical.
also many go to college.
Oh yeah.
These are the things that people think, oh, well, if you don't have your
Yeah.
diploma, you're not going to
Yeah.
college. That's not the
They
case.
absolutely go to
In
college.
fact, some of them go into college already having like their associates.
Yep.
And the thing
I
is that
know kids that do that.
homeschool is as diverse as people are. So
Right.
I I am always hesitant to do a blanket statement in
Mhm.
terms of, everybody succeeds. No, there's a lot of people who put their kids on a tablet and say, go play Minecraft and call it
Mhm.
homeschool.
Mhm.
That's a fact.
Yes, it
And
is.
it shouldn't be. I wish it weren't.
Mhm.
And I would prefer that
Yes.
than some of the things that
Yes.
they're being taught in
I'm
public school,
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
which is bad.
exactly. What I tell people is, among other things, if you don't teach your kids at all, you're still doing a better job than the public schools because you're taking away all the negative things that happen in a public school. But I don't recommend that. I don't
Right.
recommend not teaching kids. I love education. I love teaching my kids. I think we have so many opportunities to do far and away better than the public school. We need to take advantage of all those possibilities, all those opportunities that homeschoolers have, all the amazing curriculum resources that we have. We should use them all.
Well, and also
Um,
internships, right? I mean,
yes.
you can be right next to your family member who's successful at whatever and learning those skills. My son started welding when he was 14 because
Nice.
they just, people thought we like this kid and he
Yep.
had the time. So,
And they've got yes, like you said, they have the time to do it and they don't have to be on
yeah.
the school schedule.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. So one really powerful thing that I heard when I was considering it was if you if you graduated from public school and you don't feel equipped to teach your own child how to grow up and how to be an adult, then public school failed you.
Yep.
Why would you then send your child to it?
Yeah. I'll tell you, my mom had me when she was 14 years old, and she dropped out of school at that point and never went back. And
Wow.
then 11 years later, she decided she was still capable of homeschooling, and she was. Not because she had achieved, the high school diploma and the college diploma. She never received any further education, but she had the confidence in knowing that she was our mom, and with good resources and mentorship, she could give us an education. And she did. And so I tell people, and then I went on to college and got a bachelor's degree. So if a 14-year-old can drop out of school and then later have children and homeschool them successfully, you can do it too. I
I
mean,
love that.
there's no there's no qualification for homeschooling besides being a parent who is devoted to their kids
Mhm.
and willing to find all the resources available and give them. You're the facilitator. You're not always the professor. You're the facilitator, and you're making sure that they get the education that they need.
How much does a quality education cost per year can you break that up into, and I know that it varies,
Yeah.
but just that kind of basic, give some people some hope here.
Oh, yeah. It can go from 0 to thousands, and I say that because I have educated some years on 0. I have several years in my background of being a single mom and a single working mom, and so, when you're struggling to buy groceries, you don't have a curriculum budget. But I kept homeschooling even during those difficult years, and there's so many free resources for education, quality resources. And so I just started digging for them. I taught my second daughter during this very difficult time. I taught her to read with a used handbook for reading from Rebecca. It's just like this one little blue book. I got it for $3 at a used book sale, and online old readers on Gutenberg, the old classic kids readers that had
Yeah.
phonics
Yeah.
sentences. That's how I taught her to read. And, she survived it. She's an adult. She reads everything she wants to read. By the time she was about 13 or 14, she was reading classic novels on her own. So it doesn't matter what resources you use as long as you are devoted and dedicated to teaching your kids. And there's so many free resources. I have a blog post. I probably have a couple on my website where I list free resources, and the list is not even close to being exhaustive because there's so many. But I mean, you can get an encyclopedia set, you can go to the library, you can search out some really good educational YouTube channels, and then there are tons of people who put out free downloadable resources that you can just use on your computer, and you don't even have to print them. You don't even have to have a printer and paper. You can just read them on your screen. So the possibilities are endless. If you want to spend money, you can spend it. You can buy used curriculum. You can trade back and forth with friends that you have, and then you can buy new curriculum. You can spend a few $100s on a whole set of new curriculum, or you can spend thousands. That's the beauty of it. And, I'm just going to throw out the capitalism word because that's what the homeschool market is. It's a free market, and the options are endless.
And I would say, be careful though with what you're getting, because I got exposed to all of this in 2020. When everything in the world became free, and there was a ton of stuff that was pushing all the things.
Oh yeah,
in
definitely.
Public school at home for sure.
Yeah.
Yes. And
public school at home is different. And so just because it's free, you're right, it's not necessarily great. So definitely take all the stuff that we've been talking about in this episode and then apply that to the free resources that you run across for sure.
Absolutely. Just read your stuff, do your research.
Yeah.
When you go to the museums, let me wrap up here. When we went to the museums and we saw these things, I realized very quickly that at every single museum, I need to pull out my phone and I needed to take notes and say, okay, well, this is what they're saying. What's really true? And then I would sit outside, buy my son a popsicle, and we would talk about what we just saw.
Yeah.
What was true and what wasn't, and why would people lie? I think that is the most important thing. And I'll probably say this over and over in the next few episodes. The most important thing to tell your kids, and it's a hard, bitter pill to swallow, is that people will lie. Educators will lie. I am watching these propagandists constantly say, well, homeschoolers don't want their kids in school because they're indoctrinating them. But isn't that what they're doing? And they're not even answering that, yes, we're indoctrinating your kids. They're just saying, look over there. Right?
Somebody is, no matter where your kids are, somebody's indoctrinating them.
Exactly. So you have to ask, what is my goal for education? Who do I want my children to be? And that does not mean that you're cookie cuttering them. You will be this person. It's saying, what ideals, how am I going to help them be the best version of themselves, not myself projected on them, but themselves.
Yeah.
How am I going to do that? And the best place to be able to do that, and the thing that is the most threatening to any of these crazy totalitarian ideas, is the family.
Yep.
That's why the attacks, that's why the lies, that's why the telling African Americans, you're a victim, you'll always be a victim, stay in your victimhood.
And I've heard and said many times that the family is the nursery of the nation.
Yes.
Why the family is under attack. Because if they can destroy families, tear them apart, make them bitter and hate each other and mistrust each other, then half the job is already done.
I love that. I am going to probably change that and make that the theme of this. All right. Where can people find you? How can they follow you? Any more words?
I have a website that I've been running for 15 years now. It's called NickiTruesdell.com. It's just my name, NICKITRUESDELL.com. And I write mostly about homeschooling, but I write about all of the things that we've talked about here too. And under my name, you can find me on Instagram, Facebook, and X, and YouTube. And then, of course, I have a separate website for the history books that I republish. It's called KnowledgeKeepersBookstore.com. And Knowledge Keepers also has an Instagram page and a Facebook page. And I have a podcast on all the platforms too, under my name.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining me, Nikki.
Thank you for having me. This was a really fun conversation.
I'm going to put this up and I'll share it with you so that you can share it to your people as well.
I will.
Thank you so much. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.